Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And CCP has been coming out with quite a bit of development news for EVE Online. They've also held the first mass test for the new supercarrier recloner capabilities, which was pretty interesting, but it looks like they want even more data. In fact, one of the viewers mentioned that CCP should definitely test the system under tie-dye, and I think that next Tuesday, 1700 EVE time, that's exactly what they want to do, because we'll have another mass test for the recloners on CC. So if you can make it, definitely try to join us. It's pretty interesting to be there, and it helps CCP develop their game. So other than that, we have the Crimson Harvest that's happening at the moment. I still haven't found the time to go into some of these sites. First indications from you viewers is that they're pretty hard, basically battleship, battle cruiser class. Don't go in there in like a small Tech 3 destroyer. That is going to struggle very hard in some of these sites. As soon as I get a chance, I of course will dive into some of these. There's some pretty cool skins from the looks of it. Which brings us nicely to the New Eden store. Let's take a quick look at what's happening there. For Halloween there is a special sale on Omega time, not through the plex store, but it was definitely announced, and I got an email, I think, as well from CCP about that. Now, I'm on a 6-month plan, so I'm just absolutely fine. And so for now, the New Eden store looks basically like it did last week. We still have Zento Isideko front and center. Is there something that they've like changed in how it's set up? Because I'm not getting the banners. There's a couple of bundles down here, but that's just the regular stuff that we already know. More skins down here, like the Oasis Fate skin, Pacifier Firewatch skin, that looks pretty cool. Enforcer Firewatch skin as well. Now we have, of course, the Eden's Hunter and Kybernaut clade skins with those special light effects on them that are pretty cool. But yeah, I'm not noticing anything. Ruby Sungrazer for some reds. Alright, yeah, it's just, oh, down here, what the hell, we have to go all the way down here to find some sales. So it's just on name ascending, and then let's do, that's kind of weird for me. Perhaps let's try this for a moment. Price ascending, price descending, name ascending. That always looks the exact same for me. Alright, maybe a little bit of a bug. And can I like have a link for like specials or sale or something? Nope, so you actually have to go hunt for them. Alright, let's quickly try to get back there, because yeah, I thought CCP mentioned that there were going to be sales, just couldn't find them. Normally they're put front and center, but at the moment that doesn't seem to be the case. We have to go below these, and there's some new skins here. Rock Breaker, oh yeah, I saw that mentioned on the website. Indeed, here is a look at the Orca Rock Breaker skin. Right, it looks okay, but I think I prefer my black and white one that I'm sporting at the moment. And here are some sales. Okay, Flycatcher very specifically. Oh, for the interdictors, because they have been changed. Crusader as well. Alright, and some of the interceptors that have been changed. Interesting. And then some more new stuff down here. Malak Green Marshlight, we've seen that before. Nemesis Inner Zone is on sale. Okay, well, that's a lesson learned. Back before this was happening, probably a couple of weeks ago, you would always get the sales on the top part of the New Eden store, but looks like that has changed, or perhaps one of my settings has changed. That is possible as well. So you'll have to hunt for those sales for now if you want to find them. That means that we move on to the market itself, and as always we're gonna start with Plex and stuff coming in at 6:30. No, 4:30. 4:30, there we go. Let's get started. Here is the Plex chart, definitely continuing the hesitation, staying below 2.75 million on average, and this is probably one of the smallest moves we've seen on a weekly basis. There were a couple of Plex for sale at 2,824,000, so just 1,000 ISK difference from last week, and it's right back on the money at the moment. We're still on 2,825 in GTA 4.4. Now, when it comes to the player-owned trade hubs, we're still above 2.8 million, so that is definitely a very narrow margin, and the buyers are at 2.7 million. Yeah, in fact, that's a super narrow move as well. 2.680 million in GTA 4.4, 2.682 million in the Perimeter Tranquility Trading Tower. So I've honestly never seen Plex this stable over a 1 week period. There is this Omega sale going on that is perhaps cooling the market down, but I'm definitely seeing this as more hesitation because, of course, CCP had this announcement that they're looking at ISK generation in nullsec, and they're going to try to basically rebalance that with the dynamic system. The safer you make your routing space, the lower the bounties are going to be. And then there will be special things like PvP destruction and other metrics that will then allow you to have higher bounties, and we'll have a dynamic system like that. But I personally do think that the market is now already trying to work its way through, well, if that's happening for bounties in nullsec, it's bound to happen for incursions, it could happen for missions, it could basically happen for everything, including the resources. What will be the net result of all that? It is super difficult to know, of course, but that's where Plex would come in. If you're expecting more deflation, which I personally am, with less ISK generation, then you can actually expect more pressure on the price. If you think that the players can just find the optimal routes decently quickly, and that ISK generation is still going to become an inflationary thing, which generally in an online economy would be the case, because you as a player, you always want to make more ISK than you spend in general. There are some exceptions, of course, but most players, I think, will look for that type of balance. So then you would expect inflation, of course, and at the moment there's basically hesitation. We've been flat for a couple of weeks, and we basically haven't moved from last week in Plex itself. Definitely a unique situation. Must also be said, of course, EVE Online is quite a unique online economy as well, being such a long-standing one. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this shakes out over the winter. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificates that are actually not exactly mirroring what happens with Plex. They actually jumped up to 1.4 billion and then back down. But of course, what you should notice is that the volumes are down substantially as well. And this is not the same type of market. Plex is being traded up to 1 million times a day, whereas the multiple pilot training certificates, there may be 10 or less than 10 a day, I think. No, let's say less than 50 a day. It is completely different in price range as well. Almost 1.4 billion for the sellers, above 1.3 billion for the buyers. On this latest dip, we basically have some filling, I think, that happens with some people trying to sell at these better prices, and we're again coming together here as well. A little bit of a more of a wavy movement with a slide up trend on the 20-day moving average, where the Plex has gone completely flat here. So not sure what to make of this just yet. I do think it's basically because of the smaller market that the pilot training certificate is. Next up, the skill extractor, that of course mirror Plex super closely, and you can clearly see on the chart that we are flat here as well. 313,000 for the sellers, 309, almost 310 million for the buyers. That's like a 1%, even less than 1% margin between these sellers and buyers, pretty much. That is super narrow. Definitely also more hesitation in the market. So how high do the sellers go in GTA? 313 to 322. All right, a little bit of a jump up, but again, definitely not that much. On the skill injector front, I like to start with the chart here. We have more downwards pressure on the large skill injectors. On this one, I'm going to say, of course, Plex is flat, so in my opinion it has to be more skill point generation from CCP, and well, you have the daily login rewards with the Crimson Harvest, lots of SP up for grabs there. The daily login rewards generally that like builds up to like 250,000 skill points is also still in effect, so we definitely have a lot of SP again for this holiday season that can be expected, and the market is anticipating on that, which is not good news because I myself am holding a large skill injector, hoping to sell it, and unfortunately I don't have the price of that here anymore. Must have bought it before I got my new rig. Anyways, the pressure is pretty obvious, and timing this market is going to be very difficult because of course CCP has been super super generous with SP the last couple of years, and this holiday season looks like that trend is going to continue. So these small scale injectors are also showing that same pressure, a little bit more steady, but also breaking through the 140 million market range. 137.6 million for the sellers, 125.5 million for the buyers. Decently narrow margin here as well, and a slight markup in JITA 44 up to, let's see, 137 to 141. It's a little bit of a markup, but it's really not that big either. And then we have our different injector. Here is the daily alpha injector that is continuing to build on its strength, showing a little bit of volatility, but staying or trying to stay above 45 million ISK. Pretty impressive. 47 million for the sellers, 42 million for the buyers, showing that this is a different market from the other injectors tied to the alpha clone players for EVE Online, and it looks like there's quite a bit of hunger there for all of that extra SP, which is understandable, of course. As an alpha player, working your way to 40-50 million is quite a different proposition than something like 670 million ISK here. And this is a workable goal, and it makes sense to me personally that a decent amount of players, especially considering the real life economic situation that everyone finds themselves in at the moment, that there's quite a bit of an attraction to play as an alpha clone, to maybe get that personal restart, get another character in, play him, enjoy him, and then try to build him up through your efforts through these daily alpha injectors. For me, that does make a lot of sense. It is showing that the alpha clone program for EVE Online seems to be pretty popular at the moment. And then finally, we have the hypercores that I'm also viewing as a bit of a metric for general activity. Is it able to stay above 300,000 ISK? Nope, 294,000 for the sellers, 277 for the buyers. A slight uptick from the summer, right, where we spent most of the summer towards 280,000 as the average. Right now is at 300,000. So you could definitely see this as, yeah, the summer ending and activity increasing again. But for now, I mean, it's like, I'm looking at it as this, but I'm not sure if that correlation is correct. We have to remember that it turns out, just as CCP actually announced, that the Hypernet relay is decently niche. I personally don't use it. I don't have any ideas how many transactions happen over there. But if you look at the JITA local and things like that, it's still there, but the good old contract scams and things like that have definitely come back as well. So Hypercore, Hypernet relay, not the major gambling problem that some people feared it to become in EVE Online. Next up, the minerals, not PI. Here is minerals coming in at 13 minutes. 1300, let's get going, and here is Tritanium actually falling back a little bit after reaching 10 ISK, again reaching the same peak as in April for the average price. The market decides that that's a little bit too fast, too quickly. I personally also think that high-sec mining is decently attractive at the moment because of its safety, of course, being in high-sec, and because of the very nice return that 9-10 ISK Tritanium gives you. And as a result, quite a few players may have just moved some of their null-sec mining alts into high-sec, potentially also special corporations and things like that. Takes a little bit of time to work that way, of course, but once the supplies get up and running, that is of course putting some pressure on the price. We are talking about, let's take a look here, 870 for the sellers of Tritanium, 838 for the buyers. And again, I personally do see like a slight increase in the numbers here. 155 million, another 40 million, 106 million, 34 million, another 70 million units. So a decent flow is starting to happen. And I don't think that these are old reserves necessarily. I personally do think that, which is a little bit of a surprise to me, you'd think that compressed ores would be quite a bit more attractive. But no, we have very good supplies of just raw Tritanium finding its way to the market, and that is actually managing to put some pressure on the price, bring us back below 9 ISK. On the pyrite chart, we are able to maintain our gains and in fact still slowly edging up from 12.5 ISK In fact, it's 14 for the sellers and 13.50 for the buyers. That does seem to be a problem. So not a massive flood of pyrites. Tritanium and the Veldspar must really be in vogue for the miners, and anything that produces pyrite is struggling at the moment. And this to me does cement that the inversion may just be over. If tritanium moves back towards its more historic normal, 7 ADISC being a really good price, so staying above ADISC is actually still really not bad. We gotta put that in perspective. But then pyrite has overtaken tritanium again, getting back into that normal situation because you get a lot less pyrite per cubic meter of ore. So back at 14 ISK, very, very impressive jump up, of course, for something that is still available in HiSec. After that, we have the Mexalon chart that is also cooling down a little bit, went up to 125, but that seems to be going back down. 110 ISK for the sellers though, 105 ISK for the buyers is still an amazing price. 60, 70 ISK was actually always a normal price for Mexalon, so your return there for Mexalon and Tritanium takes a little bit of a hit, but it's quite okay. And honestly, all of this to me means that HiSec mining will still be decently popular, because your side product pyrite all of a sudden also becomes something worth looking into. So pretty decent moves back down for both Mexalon and Tritanium, but nowhere near problematic. This is still a great price. And then of course, so I actually have to remember this, it's at 110 ISK for Mexalon. What is Isogen doing? That is a much bigger pullback than what I thought. I thought we'd at least be able to maintain 60-ish ISK, but no, we are falling back. 40 ISK for the sellers, 36.4 ISK for the buyers. And I will be honest here, I do think this is still old reserves coming back in. 60 million units, 60 million units, 50 million units, another 20 million units down here, driving that price down. And this is probably a lot. Look at that, 5 round, 5 round, 5 round, 5 round. To me, and a couple of more of them where probably someone then snagged up a couple of these, bought a couple of these, and it's just coming in. I personally do think that these are investors or hoarders like myself. Actually, I have a decent amount of Isogen still lying around from my old mining activities that are finally seeing this as an opportunity to dump them on the market. And so we could be in for a very bumpy ride, because 60 ISK, we haven't seen that in a super long time. So now we're getting some pretty massive dumping. But even at 50, some people are saying that's still okay. 40, that's still a lot better than 15 about a year ago. And so we are getting this dumping from old reserves that are currently causing some problems with the market maintaining the high price that in my opinion eventually should look like overtaking Mexalon, because you get a lot less Isogen per cubic meter than you get Mexalon, and on top of that now you need it from low sec. You have to go and get it in low sec as well. So to still see 60 million, 50 million units, compare that to Tritanium, that is like a magnitude is way easier to get in big volumes. That to me feels like this is old reserves that are coming out to play, that are currently flooding the market. Some players are willing to dump them at 40 ISK, some have asked 50 ISK and tried 60, and right now it is this battle between, alright, it's gonna become rare, it's gonna be hard to get, it's definitely gonna become more valuable, but what is the correct price to dump at? And then of course impatience, getting that liquid ISK becomes part of the equation as well. So this is a massive pullback from 60 to 40, that's like a third of the price. That's pretty damn significant, but this is, in my opinion, not something that's here to stay. I do think that we'll see volatility as those stocks get used up by the industry, and then prices will move back up, and then some older stocks will find their way in again. So expect a bumpy ride in Isogen. After that we have Noxium, and that one pulls back a little bit as well, but look at the price range that it is doing it from. 1250 compared to 250 ISK last year. That's 1000 ISK extra, pretty damn amazing. And it's still at 1250 for the sellers and 1063 for the buyers. And here that's the big difference, right? You would expect Noxium It's more rare than Isogen, but not to bring the numbers down to 5 million, 500,000 units. Compare that to those 50, 60 million units of Isogen. Very different dynamic here. Able to maintain a lot more of its gains because supply demand is in line and you need fresh production to keep the market going, which you need to get from mostly low sec, potentially null sec as well. And I've actually seen some comments mention that they can still find some of these minerals from ores in some of the sites, so definitely something that I'm going to try to look into myself as well. After that, we have our nullsec minerals that have returned to their nullsec status. Basically, here is Zydrine, also giving back a little bit of ground, but of course climbed to a very pronounced one-year high point of 1,400 ISK, almost triple the price of the start of the year, and it is still selling for 1,280 ISK. Buyers coming in at 1216. That is still basically the return of Zydrine well above 1,000 ISK, which it I think historically always used to be. So this is still a pretty good price. And then we have our other lagging indicator to me personally that went up to 800 ISK, but from historics perspective and again volume perspective per mineral should be slightly more expensive than Zydrine, or at least be in the same ballpark. And it is still selling for 760 ISK now, buyers coming in at 740. And again, if I take a quick look at that, 1 million units, 1.2 million units, that's the biggest sell order for Zydrine. What is keeping things from exploding in Megasite or maintaining an upwards trajectory? Well, here's another 47 million units. Here's another 7 million units. And then if we go down, do I find any more big ones? Another 9. So, but there is definitely one big sell order right here of 47 million units that probably makes up more Megasite than the entire Zydrine sell chart over here by quite a big margin. And that is of course the problem. Again, in my opinion, it is stocks, not necessarily. Well, actually, I've always said that Megasite, I don't see how you get massive stocks of that stuff still out there. So perhaps there is a supply source, although this does make it look like one big investor that still has a lot of Megasite to sell that is keeping that price range in check. That's going to be interesting to see when that eventually dries up, what happens with the price of Megasite. And then let's try to not forget this week. Here is Morphite that did spike up to 40,000 ISK. I'm not sure, that could have been an all-time high for Morphite, so normal that you have to go back down a little bit from that, but it is still super expensive. 26,000 ISK for the sellers, 24,000 ISK for the buyers. And yeah, my historic buy opportunity for Morphite was always below 10,000 ISK, so that gives you a little bit of a perspective. And also, so we started the year at around 10,000 ISK, and then we went up to 20k, which looked like an insanely good sell opportunity. But of course, the resource change from CCP put all of that into a different perspective, and so this chart actually looks a lot flatter than it did just a couple months ago. Crazy stuff. Let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 22.55. Like that, and with all of that volatility, of course, as with last week, I'm still expecting PI to be the casualty here. The passive generation of stuff is gonna be, in my opinion, the least profitable, looking at what CCP is doing, and so ISK is gonna be pretty narrow here as well for investors in PI. So we have broadcast nodes that reached a one-year low point of 1.5 million about a week ago. It is resurging a little bit, but let's see how high. 1.7 million for the sellers, that's still pretty low, and buyers are still below 1.5 million. And again, look at the amount of supply that you have compared to the amount of buyers. That is of course the real problem. Next up, we have the construction blocks. Ouch, falling off a second cliff. We've been here before. We went to 8,000 ISK in early June, and right now it looks like we're playing with that range again. Yeah, 8,000 for the buyers, 8,700 for the sellers. So this is really, yeah, it's a situation we basically have to kind of live with that for now. It could be that CCP at some point will try to revalue PI a little bit. New structures would definitely do that. New implants would be good for some of them, and perhaps something with fuels as well, although I personally think that CCP is kind of happy with how this is countering the ICE products changes, which we'll take a look at as the extra product this week. But yeah, for something that's super passive, expect that return to be under pressure in this situation when CCP is very clearly trying to increase the value of loss and increase the value of activity in the game. And so this is the result, a second one that is playing with 1 year low points, and this chart is actually already a very much a pressure chart, because last year, around fall is where we basically had our first drop off, and then it never really recovered. We tried to write 12k here, something like that was I think the old average for construction blocks. Next up we have consumer electronics, kind of the same thing. I think historically 12,500 and above was easily possible. This was the new average prop after our fall slump, and then we just continue to see that pressure build. We are now substantially below 10,000 disc, 9,400 for the sellers, 8,300 for the buyers. Again, still a pretty big gap between sellers and buyers, despite the fact that we are already trading at these lower ranges. For a while, when we had that fall slump, I think the PI materials tied to fuels were still doing pretty well. You can see that here at the start at 12,500 for coolants. That is super easy to produce on Gas Planet, but even here it is just to no avail, and we are dropping to another 1 year low point for coolants at 8,900 disc for the sellers, 7,700 disc for the buyers. Again, really big margin for this low price point, and as a result, excuse me, a little bit of a problem with my microphone, with my headset I mean. So yeah, this is again that same problem. This is something that is passively created, and it's getting harder to allocate a lot of ISK for PI at the moment. Next up we have our cryoprotectant solutions, and this chart right with a bubble right here in March, April is the segment that gains from new implant sets being introduced, but here as well did actually well a couple of months ago to climb back, but the pressure is starting to show here as well. 112,000 for cryoprotectant solutions, couple of buyers still above 100,000 disc. Once we go below that, that was my go-to for try to grab some as an investment, but granted the current situation in general is not very promising for PI, so I'm only going to do that in very tiny investments, I think. Enriched uranium, same story, tied to fuels, 1 year low point, and enriched uranium is a lot harder to make than coolants, and you can see that from the starting price here as well. Coolant starting at 12,500, enriched uranium starting at almost 14,000 ISK as the average price, but there's just no saving it. 9,700 for the sellers, 9,000, and way below that very quickly for the buyers. 1 year low point. I think this situation is indeed what I'm speculating it is. It's just the ISK is no longer available for this very specific part of the economy that is generated very passively. And of course, the news from CCP that they are looking at these dynamic systems for ISK generation as well, I think will have put a damper on quite a bit of potential buying or speculating in PI as well. 1.8 million for integrity response drones, and look at that, buyers below 1.5 million as well, which is a low point right here on the chart, below the entire chart by a decent margin. Mechanical parts as well, easy to produce from barren planets, 11,000 start of the year, and now 1 year low point again, 9,000 for the sellers, 8,700 for the buyers. This could become basically the new range for a lot of these. And then it's also tied to implants, so look at that, doing decently well to maintain a price above 5k, above the 1 year low point, and now at the tail end we're right back there. 5,100 for the sellers, 4,700 for the first buyer, and then 4,500 for the next one. So these are the ones where the market is really at, and this one is saying I want some of that nanite at this price range. This is exactly what I would personally try to do if I was looking for these investments. Be a little bit aggressive, but do so in decently small volumes, that if these buyers would go down to like 4,300 on more supply, you can try the same thing at 4,500, and then you have that that cheap stuff that you can ride all the way down without necessarily catching the whole falling knife of these PI prices, because you're just going in massively with a couple 100,000 units or something like that. So whoever this is, you are doing exactly what I would do as well. Next up, we have the nano factories, clearly struggling again, trying to hold on a little bit at the tail end, but 900,000, a little bit above that again, to be honest, 940 for the sellers, but less than 800,000 for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators, actually not a 1 year low point, but still well below 1 million. In fact, buyers at less than 800,000, at 770,000 disc. If you try to get something like that to show on the chart, that is starting to play with these low points again, showing that there's just not enough supply to plug that gap quickly, but the pressure is clearly back on any new supply. And so we're gonna be looking at these low points again pretty soon, I think. Recursive computer modules, very pronounced 1 year low point at 1 million ISK on the chart. Ouch. Robotics, another 1 year low point. I never thought we would see this, but we're at 70,000. Yeah, below 70,000 ISK for robotics on the buy side. A good that normally goes for 100,000 ISK average price. Crazy stuff. Self-harmonizing power cores. Again, very same story. We get a little bit of buying as we reach 1.25 million and go back below the entire chart, pushing sellers back to 1.5, buyers up to 1.34, but where we start the year at is 2 million ISK. So again, very same story. Sterile conduits, the one advanced PI material that was holding on a little bit better, but again, also it's going to be a different story if we had a longer chart here, because we clearly come down from the 1.5 million range, and right now we're back. How much? We're actually still above 900,000 ISK for the buyers, but not by too much anymore. So same story. Yukomi superconductors tied to implants, and all right, my one exception then, I would be looking at 50,000 ISK for buying Yukomi superconductors, and we're still at 78,000 for the sellers and 70,000 for the buyers. There is one point of light here, is that Yukomi superconductors are able to maintain their value decently well. And finally, with rare mainframes, well, it's the story we've seen throughout this entire PI segment. 1 year low point, or definitely playing with that. Buyers are coming in at less than 1.4 million, so they definitely want to buy below the entire chart. Let's move on to the advanced moon materials at 3210. So my speculation is that advanced moon mats would be suffering the same thing as PI, so a lack of ISK flowing into it, but so far it looks like what may have overshadowed that a little bit is the loss of Niarja to the Triglavian collective, which has pulled the trade hubs away, because in order to make this stuff like crystalline carbonite, if I'm not mistaken, you need to be in low or null sec in order to have those reactions going, and so that does mean that trade hubs are basically dependent on imports from these spaces, whereas PI can be produced pretty much anywhere. And as a result, we do have this different dynamic, which is something that when I find some time, it's always an excuse with me, I know, but I do have this real life job that I still need to do as well. Unfortunately, I will look into all of the trade hubs, and very specifically I think at advanced moon materials, to see if there are new trade routes that are starting to pop up, because I think that this one, this category tied into Tech 2 production could actually be one of the strongest indicators when it comes to changes into the trade hub activities. We already saw that Amar was definitely having different price dynamics with these raw resources than Jita on some of the minerals and things like that. So I think in general it could be very cool, and I will try to do so, including Amar trade hubs, Dodixie for Galente, all of that stuff. So this to me is something that should be looked at that a little bit differently. I think minerals, PI, plex stuff can be seen as what's happening generally in the game, but for advanced Mu materials, you could look at very substantial regional differences between these. And for instance, crystalline carbonate here for Galente production is up to a 1-year high point because of a lack of supply. 179 ISK for the sellers, 161 for the buyers, and I would not be surprised if you live close to the Dixie or close to Amar that you're seeing a completely different market and dynamic, and that could provide you with some very nice trade opportunities for moving stuff, for not the classical station trading, which at first Eve Talk was all about, because JITA was just so much bigger and so central to the entire cluster. So now this could definitely change on some of these and could be very interesting, but also takes quite a bit more work to actually look at it completely then. So crystalline carbonates, 1-year high point, almost 180 for the sellers on a lack of supply. Moving on to the it's carbides, and so I need the titanium carbide for Caldari ships. That one is coming back down, heading towards 150 in fact, and we're talking 167 for the sellers but 152 for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up, a bit of supply quashing that increased price up to 187, so that moved very quickly and could still very much be in line with what I was saying. Prices can go up here on a lack of supply as the trade routes are changing, and then eventually of course the players find that opportunity, plug that gap, and so we have this bit of volatility that is starting to build in titanium carbide, but they may have overshot a little bit because we're back below average. Next up we have ferrite carbide for Minmatar production, continuing to, in my opinion, struggle with decently low prices. 134, definitely cheaper than the previous two, 125 for the sellers. And then supply wise, well, it's 1 in the last 24 hours, and then just look at how old all of these are. So this could be a bit of inertia on an oversupply that happened because of the 2 war spikes, right? This was the Imperium. They have Tech 2 Minmatar ships as part of their meta, and so there was a lot of speculation, but also a lot of supply that came in all of a sudden to drive the price down to that 125 range. It happened twice. So I think here we are talking inertia from oversupply, an over response to these 2 price spikes. And then finally we have for Amar our tungsten carbide that is also still struggling to get back above average. 163 for the sellers and 158 for the buyers on quite a decent supply here. Last 24 hours we get these units, and then days, 2 days, 3 days, very steady. Looks like the supply routes for tungsten carbide, surprisingly enough for Amar stuff, is up and running and decently stable. And so again here you could have the exact opposite. Our stuff is this stuff drying up in Dodixie, in Amar. It's a big move, but if the price difference is big enough, it could be interesting to try that one. Next up we have the meta materials, which is photonic meta materials for Galente. Very different picture than the carbides, which is very close to 1-year low point. We are talking 12,300 ISK for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Again, same thing, a low price could be a good opportunity to buy, to move it to another trade hub and sell at a much better price there. 2.2 non-linear metamaterials for Caldari. That one is back above average. What a difference, right? Photonic metamaterials, 12,300 ISK. Non-linear metamaterials, 23,000 ISK for the sellers, 22,300 ISK for the buyers, and back above average. So if you've got some cheap stuff, a resource for cheap non-linear metamaterials, this could be a nice opportunity. Then we have plasmonic for Minmatar. That one is still clearly struggling with a below average price as well. 16,250 for the sellers and 15,750 for the buyers. Decently narrow margin, but I think also decently well supplied at the moment. Could be a result of that oversupply of the carbides. And then finally we've got terahertz metamaterials that is struggling very much, getting back down to 16,000 ISK for the sellers on basically no buyers, 13,000 ISK for those buyers. Again, same story. It's a little bit of work and I can't do it for you at the moment, but if where you live, there's a different trade hub and you see that there's a lack of rare earths metamaterials, this could be a very nice opportunity to start moving around. And what a difference between some of these, right? Again, at a high point 23,000, at a low point 12,000 for these metamaterials on the sell side of things, and that for something that should be decently equivalent. I think that there is starting to be quite a bit of opportunity for that Take-Two production chain in trade, in the sense of buy low somewhere, move it, and then sell high somewhere else, rather than trying to ride the waves of the goods themselves and try and buy and sell locally. Then we have the rest of the stuff that's, I think, a little bit more generic and thus struggling a little bit more with the same problem as PI. Here is fermionic condensate, clearly trading well below average and at very close to 1 year low point, in fact, and still under pressure at the tail end. 75,000 for the sellers, 71,000 for the buyers. Started the year at 90,000 disc. Ferrogel, 1 year low point, that pressure is pretty damn obvious, and 40k was another one of those lower trade ranges where the market started to settle at, and now it's breaking 30,000. Look at that, less than 30,000 for the sellers, 28,000 for the buyers. I think here you could still look for those regional differences, but I personally expect that to be a little bit harder to do. Or to find. Then we have our Fullerites, same thing, 1 year low point, and despite breaking 750, we're still seeing that pressure. 724 now for the sellers, 683 for the buyers. Hypersynaptic fibers, perhaps our one exception, able to maintain its 1 year average pretty much for 11,000 disc. We're definitely trading below that at the moment. Nano transistors, again, very clear pressure. It had a very good summer, able to trade at like 6,000 plus for most of that summer, but now we are back at a much lower range. 4,000 for the sellers, 3,900 for the buyers. Yeah, the low end of the range was 5,000 for most of the year, and now we are definitely well below that. Phenolic composites also again going down, 2,000 start of the year, now trading at around 1,600. Then we have the ceramic fibers that are crawling out of that hole a little bit, but have basically never been that great with a range of less than 400 disc at the moment. So that's my read on the advanced moon materials, and I'll try to find some time to look at Dodixie, to look at Amar with this category. I think there are opportunities there. Let's see if there are opportunities in the Take-Two ship market, coming in at 41.40. There we go, and let's get started as always with the Basilisk. And alright, a little bit of surprise, but here it is. Lack of Basilisk supply putting us at 254 million ISK. That then jumps out. In Tranquility Trading Tower we get one at 220, buyers are up to 200. Did I buy any of these? I don't think so, but not that long ago you could have bought these for less than 190 million for sure. So Take-Two trading, well, right now Basilisk definitely in a nice sell spike. Next up here we've got the Cerberus that, yes, basically tried to spike but was, I think, flattened very quickly by supply and is still trading for 250 million, almost 223 for the sellers. Well, if you bought at the low points right here in October, for instance, well below 200 million, you still have a sell opportunity. I think the Cerberus could still be okay for the Crimson Harvest, although battlecruiser battleship is probably what it's aimed at. If there's one ship that I think could still handle it, it would be the Cerberus. Amazing Take-Two tank, of course, and still missiles with, I think, drones. And is it up to medium drones? I'm not sure about that. No, it's a couple of small drones, but you can definitely have your missiles take care of bigger targets and then your drones slowly take care of the small stuff. So this could be why we have this maintaining of the price at around 250 million ISK for the Cerberus. It's just a great platform. NOS could be a part of that as well, as we see these higher volumes. Next up, we've got the Guardian. Went up to 230 million, is already working its way back down to 200 on average. 207 million for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. Unfortunately, the buyers have never been forced up enough to create a great sell opportunity for the Guardian, but there's definitely a small trade to be made with 180 at the low point and 230 at the high point. Next up here we get the Hound slowly edging back up above 25 million. That unfortunately is not the volatility that we're looking for. 26 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. A bit too early for me to make a move. The Ikitursa, that one is interesting, and in fact I got an email with a bit of a request. I know I put it down. I'm gonna try to take a look at that at some point. Is that with Pogven basically being established, the Triglavians having their 27 systems, everything else has disappeared, which means that the supply of Triglavian stuff, skill books and things like that, probably products for Tech 2 ships, have dried up substantially all of a sudden, and that means that this is becoming very expensive and very rare. Again, 750 million for an Ikitursa, 591 million for the buyers. Very, very expensive, and this of course puts things into a different perspective from my opinion. In my opinion, when it comes to Triglavians and Edencom stuff, it is definitely possible that what CCP actually wants here is to have a massive scarcity in this Omega class of ships and a very, very high price. If you want to fly that Edencom ship with max skills, with everything completely pimped out, it is going to be extremely expensive to do so. Same thing with the Triglavians that have now all of a sudden shot back up in price quite substantially. So this is something that I'll try to look at, but there's so much that I want to look at the moment that we can't do everything in one sitting. But this is very noticeable, and I can't know for sure, of course, but for me, it looks like that may be an option that CCP is going for, rather than making the Triglavians in line with the 4 empires and then Edencom eventually in line with Triglavians and thus the 4 empires as well in price ranges. This could become super exclusive and super expensive. Next up, we have the Ishtar. That's pretty much the opposite, because this is one of those ships that is basically good at everything. PvP, PvE, it's got its place in all of that. And this one is at the low end of its trade range by quite a little bit. In fact, getting close to 1 year low point. 207 million for the sellers, 196 million for the buyers. Very cheap for an Ishtar that normally costs you above 230. After that, we have the Manticore that's also making its way back towards 30 million ISK, almost there for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers still. No, they're up a little bit. So here, a slight trade opportunity for those that bought probably around 10 days ago. After that, we've got the Munin that is slowly edging back above 200 million as well. 223 for the sellers and 193 for the buyers. What's a bit disappointing is basically the slowness of these changes. So we'd like to see spikes like this, where we can try to trade very quickly and make up for the smaller volumes and for the bigger risk with a bigger percentage increase. And now it's all feeling a little bit more slow. Nemesis also slowed down above 25 million and is basically flat. Buyers are still at 22 million. So unfortunately, we never went to the point where buyers were forced up as well because a drying up or a big purchase or something like that. Nope, we're just right in the middle of everything. Not the best place to be. The Oneros is still super low, but it's been like that for several months. Honestly, if you are looking at buying an Oneros, buyers are at 140 million ISK. Well, you can buy one in my opinion. The volumes are not great on this ship, so I think by now you probably have your speculation Oneros already. The Panther continuing to show pressure on the price here, back below 1.1 billion. 1.1 billion for the sellers and 1 billion for the buyers though. So that's interesting. Is that Tranquility Trading Tower? Nope, no activity there. Interesting to see the average price diving down as well. Buyers still above 1 billion though. So I'm not sure about cost, which is what I'm looking at these battleships for. Next up, we have the Purifier, went up to 30 million ISK. So this is a little bit better, right? A 1 month trade where you can probably have grabbed some very close to 20 million ISK. and then sell them above 30, and now we're back again in that place where we don't want to be, I think, with sellers at 25, yeah, buyers at 23 million. That's really not the correct range for either moves. Scimitar staying below 200 million ISK, 202 for the sellers, 177. It's quite often these buyers that are never forced up by a lack of supply or massive purchases, and as a result we have this calmer Take-Two market at the moment. The Widow making its way back above a billion as well, almost 1.1 for the sellers and above a billion for the buyers. Again, not sure, so I would think perhaps Take-Two production costs are down, but advanced movements are showing that it's all over the place, and so I'm still not sure what to make of all of that. And then finally we get the Zealot that's slowly crawling, again slowly, which is not good news for Take-Two. I'd love to see violence, I'd love to see these big cliffs and these big jumps up. But at the moment that's just not happening. The Zealot slowly edging its way to 216 for the sellers and 192 for the buyers. Alright, quick drink and then we'll move on to the Tech3 ships. So Tech3 at 49.40. Like that, and let's take a look at these. So the Confessor very flat below 40 million ISK, 38 for the first seller, almost 40 for most, 36 million for the buyers, and this is a little bit worrying. Fresh supply, nothing. Take a quick look that the Tranquility Trading Tower is not where this has moved. No, it hasn't. So this is interesting. This is definitely feeling like a complete lack of supply forming in the Confessor. Someone else, another ship, must have been absorbing that supply, in my opinion, because of a better price potential. Which ship is that? Probably the Hecate, and I went up to 60 million ISK about 10 days ago, worked its way back down to 50, but is actually able to stay there. 50 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers, and a full page of new supply, but 17, 10, 20 and 17, and everything else is definitely pretty low in volume for something that is 20% more costly than the Confessor. So this also feels like decently low supply. Let's see if the Jackdaw has done anything strange. He's slowly edging up to 40 million ISK, so a slight price response, I think, to a lack of supply, which again is being confirmed. We've got one ship here in the last 24 hours and then another 20, but everything else is much older, and so the sellers have slowly made their way above 40 million ISK, 37 million for the buyers, and again, not enough supply in my opinion. And then finally we get this Vapel with what was looking like an inverse response going below 35 million ISK is now going for 38 almost for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers, and here we get a bit of inertia from some old supply, 100 here, 55 and 45, that's quite a little bit. Last 24 hours, that's very much surprising, right? More Vapels in the last 24 hours than Confessors. This is interesting, and honestly, if I had to take a gamble on this right now, I would try to buy a couple of Confessors close to this 36 million range. This looks like it could be primed for a real dry up. There's still supply being drawn into the Hecate because it's got this much better price. And eventually I think it could move, which is already starting to do for the Jackdaw, but it should move the Confessor up in price as well. Let's see if I am correct on that in the upcoming weeks. And then to me, this does still feel like a healthy market with enough supply, generally speaking, that it's not that easy to completely manipulate it or anything like that. And right now it's undersupplied, which means that the prices could go up. Then we'll take a quick look at what these cruisers have been doing. Here is the Legion able to maintain some of the gains, 156 for the sellers, 145 for the buyers. Next up here we get the Loki. This could also maybe be tied to the event. A Tech3 cruiser is going to normally compete with battleships and things like that for the Crimson Harvest. And here is then the Loki, slightly up, but it's still very cheap. 152 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. Next up here is the Proteus, actually doing really well. 170 million for the sellers, 156 for the buyers. Is that more? It is more expensive. What is considered to be the weakest Tech 3 cruiser is actually the most expensive at the moment. And then finally we've got the Tengu flat below 150. It's almost 150 for the sellers. 210 units gonna keep this in check. So here we get a very different story, right? What should be in the meta, right? The low-key, very cheap at the moment. Supply-wise, last 24 hours, 17 ships, 1 sell order. These are not the numbers for very cheap prices, yet here we are. And then what I think is considered to be the worst Tech 3 cruiser, the Proteus, is actually up in price, has decent supplies in the last couple of days, a full page right here, and then actually climbs this mountain. Very, very strange. I have a Loki that I bought at 150 million, so I'm waiting for that gamble to pay off, but it's a gamble. This doesn't feel like something that is predictable. Like for instance, now I am sort of predicting, I'm expecting an increase in price for the Confessor. It's gonna be interesting to see if I'm right on that, but for the cruisers, I have to be honest, all of this to me is gambling, because none of this makes a lot of sense. Supply price wise just doesn't feel okay. Why are we seeing the Tengu here? Also, the Tengu should be the PvE platform, right? Because you get these missiles, you get these drones. You would expect this to be much more expensive than the Proteus, especially with these events coming. It's still very cheap with a lot of supplies that are available compared to how many are available for the Proteus, even and especially the Legion and the Loki, which are then at the same price. So it's just all around chaos for me in the Tech 3 cruiser market. I'm keeping an eye on it, of course, because I've made some of these gambles, and it's pretty interesting to see, of course, this crazy market still doing its thing. So that leaves us to the extra product for the week, and I chose ice products. So I think we go for materials and ice products. There we go, coming in at 55.30. And there we go, because we know that PI is struggling at the moment. All these fuel related PI materials are super low, and yet we actually see a little bit of a resurgence in the price of fuels. So let's go. Here is heavy water, starts here at 200, then dives its way back down to 65 ISK, and now at the tail end a little bit of volatility, but it's not that great yet. 80 ISK for the sellers, 77 ISK for the buyers. At least this really feels like a period where we're just massively oversupplied, and this is super cheap, and that may be over with the nerf to ice generation in EVE Online. And then the ones that I'm expecting to be the big winners are the isotopes. Here is helium isotopes, starts here at 600 ISK and is now selling for 900 ISK, almost 860 for the sellers, 782 for the buyers. That's an increase of 50% almost in the price of helium isotopes, and this of course is why fuels have not moved down as much as PI for fuels has. Hydrogen isotopes is next. Look at that, also starts the year below 600 ISK, low point is 500 ISK, and is currently trading for 820 for the sellers, 785 for the buyers. So this is of course the change to resources to ice generation that is showing up in these isotopes. Liquid ozone, a little bit of the same story I think as the heavy water one. Oversupplied massively, 175 range, and one exception right here, probably a war. Right, probably the war preparation. I think you need liquid ozone when you're using some of your really big ships. And then here at the tail end, we have an increased price due to scarceness that's starting to come through. 210 for the sellers, 196 for the buyers. Started the year at 250, so we definitely still have a way to go to fully recover there. Nitrogen isotopes starts at 500 ISK and is now breaking out above 1000. That's impressive. 1000 for the sellers, 946 for the buyers. Oxygen isotopes, also pretty good, starts at 600 and is currently trading for 890. So another 50% increase. And then strontium is also doing that same motion, started at 4k, ends up at 4k. This is an oversupply period at 3000 and below, and so this is the impact of the change to the ice spawning in EVE Online. It's harder to find, it's rare, and this as a result has had a big impact on especially the price of isotopes, and that together with the low prices of PI have actually kept fuel prices in check and actually jumped them up a little bit on this isotope jump, but it is coming from a super low point. So all of that in general has been decently well balanced, I would say, on the end product impact. But this is your opportunity, of course, if over the course of the last couple of years you've been one of the players that have been hoarding their isotopes or that has been buying at these low points of like less than 500 ISK. This is a great opportunity, of course, to double your ISK there, to cash out on your investment, because at the moment these are going for very high price. Specifically that nitrogen isotope, the biggest winner of this change, 100% increase in price from 500 to above 1000 ISK for the sellers. And so that's another big move, of course, one of the increased valuation due to the resource scarcity that is starting to show through on the market as well. After the minerals that have been doing this for like most of the year so far, right now the isotopes have finally made their way back as well. That was it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.